Good morning. Namaste. So if we can just take a moment and just collect ourselves and remember that this service is, in a sense, a unique experience because it aims at bringing us, each one of us individually, into the heart essence of ourself. So it's first directed completely inward. And when we can go through all of the superficial coverings of our ego identity and our emotional memories and come back into that clear atmosphere of our own self-nature, then it would be a nice place to stay when we return to the expression of being an outward projected self, that we're coming from a place of true, authentic connection. And so let's do that. Let's go inward first. As our eyes close and our awareness goes to the breath, we simply relax. And as you even perhaps tell yourself to relax, allow that directive of relax to have such an energetic quality that every cell within your body gets the transmission of that divine word, relax. And as you feel the muscles gently drawing away from the bones, even those core muscles that are hugging the bones are relaxing. Your breathing rhythm begins to change. You can breathe deeper and slower. And if you're looking for a hand mudra, a place to put your hands, if they're resting comfortably on the lap, great. If you feel more of namaskar mudra with palms touching, just to get into a balancing of the hemispheres, connecting to the heart center. And as you're moving into this communion with yourself, a return to your heart essence, it begins to dawn upon the mind that we are timeless and spaceless beings, and all of the costumes that we wear in the spatio-temporal realms are temporary. And so in this instant, we, with this higher willingness, desire to return to that timeless state. That state where everything is in perfect balance and harmony. The Paraprakriti, the Mula Prakriti, where all of nature and her forces and all of the natural entities are in perfect harmony, in a state of all-encompassing love. And whatever is arising that seems to resonate with a lower frequency or a discordant frequency, a patterning of dualism or separation, simply watch it. And know that at its root, it cannot be the real, because at the real root is this harmony. And so all discordant energies are allowed to effervescently move through the space of the mind and dissolve. And here we're connecting to the root of self that we all share. And so in the realm of the natural, all the forces, all the energies, all the winds of consciousness are balanced and radiant. And at a more subtle domain, there is the witness, the Purusha, the self, the spirit soul, this adamantine awareness. And as you anchor into it, it's akshobhya, it's immovable. It is the rock. And you are that. And as you come back home to this place of total safety, unshakable peace and stillness, there is within the stillness a voice that speaks in the stillness. And the first impression is a giggle. It is a lightness of being, a shuddha-sattva, a pure luminosity. And that is your voice. That is our voice. In the silence, in the stillness. And it is this voice that knows itself within all form, within all the movements of nature. And so we simply relax and let go and allow who we are to surface, to be, to shine. And we ask all of the avatars and the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas who anchor this consciousness within the ethers of our immediate local experience to be with us today, to guide this conversation, to move within the spaces of our thoughts and emotions, and to shift us more and more into this illuminated state, this Christ consciousness, where we may continuously, consistently know that we are the kingdom and have never ceased to be. And so we ask, whatever it is that we need to release, to heal from, to understand and let go, that it be done through this conversation and through the intermediaries of this higher being that we are. So we cast our cares at the feet of the great Master, the divine inspiration, the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. And we ask for the Guru of Gurus to take over this conversation and speak the word of life. In our pure heart essence, we say, let it be. And so it is. Amen. Good morning. So the conversation today is going to focus much upon anger. It's interesting coming from that place of luminosity and stillness and true divine connection, when we're here and we're connected to that awareness, it's impossible to be angry. Do you feel that? When you're in that state, it's like anger is so alien and so asinine that you have no desire to move into it. And yet, in this arena of life, where we find ourselves in the three-dimensional realm of body and relationships, anger oftentimes is a staple of our existence. And it is one of the major obstacles, in a sense, if you want to look at it that way, to coming back to this place of pure awareness and a state of calm and peace. It's the opposite. And that's why in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's such a heavy warning for the aspirants of Buddhism to not allow themselves to entertain or fall into the energies of anger. And it's given in such a strong deterrent that if you have a moment of anger, say the Tibetan training manuals, that you actually are destroying years of your sadhana, years and years of your practice, because what's going on within the sadhana, within the spiritual practice, is you're cultivating such fine tissues of rarefied consciousness, and you're balancing such subtle winds of consciousness flow, that when you become enraged, it's like a hurricane, and you blow down these fragile structures that would open you up to the multidimensional and to the higher nature. And so the Buddhists are giving you that warning. And I oftentimes will come across that as a reminder, and there's something in my heart that goes, okay, I get it. It's definitely a good deterrent, and it makes sense. But aren't we here also to process these karmic patterns and to work through the stuff that many of us don't even know is still within our basement? And when this stuff comes up, it can come up like a torrent. It can come up like something that we were not expecting to have such force and ferocity. And yet we have a part of ourselves that is maybe for many of us along the path for some time and cultivating peace and cultivating compassion. And then something comes along where, and for many of us, I think at this point, where we will feel justified to set aside our higher awareness, our compassion, and become outraged over something that's been going on, whether it's a current event or a family issue or something within your immediate sphere. And we have this feeling oftentimes that there is a time and a place for anger. There is a time and a place for attack. And I want to talk to you, with you, about all of that today, because I think it's a both-and situation, as most spiritual situations are, that there is a right use of anger, if I could say it that way. Because have you ever felt like you've been stuck in your life, or you've been taking the wrong path that has been detrimental to your health or your existence, and then at one point along the way you stop and you get angry? I'm not going to let them do this to me anymore, or I'm not going to keep doing this to myself anymore. That there is some kind of transformational value in anger. And by having this surge of energy, it gets you out of being stuck. It gets you out of being where you were in this place of inauthenticity or dysfunctionality. And the anger actually is a good use of energy to break out of those bonds and get back onto the pathway of ascent. So there can be a very healthy use of anger. And I'm going to pull a little bit from Dr. Hawkins' book, Letting Go. And if you're familiar with his work, throughout his whole teaching, he had the scale of consciousness. And at the very base of the scale, you have shame, which is ranking around 20%. Your at your weakest level of consciousness when you're encountering shame states where you're completely disempowered and the environment is controlling you. And then you can rise through this scale of emotions. And the way he has it is it goes up to guilt at 30, apathy at 50, grief at 75, fear is registering at 100, and this is all through kinesiology, through muscle testing. So you begin to even have more strength as you move into desire at 125. And then anger is 150, and his little blurb on anger here says, this energy overcomes the source of fear by force. That's what we were just talking about. And attack, if necessary. So oftentimes when we've been stuck, when somebody has been abusing boundaries, violating boundaries, we will attack them, whether it's an individual or a nation. Or, we become, in a sense, very forceful with ourselves to pull ourselves out of those places of breakdown or dysfunction. And he says, anger is also very irritable, explosive, bitter, volatile, resentful. It likes to get even. And one of the mottos is, I'll show you. And so the reason why I bring this up this morning is because, through the week I kind of just keep tuning into the ether and seeing what's the download for Sunday morning. You're so sensitive. You already know where I'm going. So around 9 o'clock last night, I had done all this preparation, setting my mind, studying, etc. And then a little tiff began to erupt with my wife. And I got into a place where my patience reached a limit. And I just became very angry. And I went into the office and I shut the door. I'm like, that's it. That's the message. She did. She is such an angel. Really, really grateful for her. And it's interesting because one of the things that comes up is, when we move along the path for a little while, we kind of get a version of ourselves. We have an ego that's spiritual. And we shouldn't be angry anymore. Like anger is animalistic, it's unenlightened, it's not something that it's destructive, it's all of those things that we don't want to be. And like I said, yet we have these shadow parts of ourselves in the basement that are begging to be processed, begging to be healed. And the only way to do it is here and now in this arena. And so repressed anger is the number one cause for migraines and heart disease and even cancer. So if we're not expressing our anger in a healthy way, then we're actually killing ourselves. So to get out of the denial that you shouldn't be angry, and yet at the same time cultivating the tools that will give us the opportunity to understand our anger and move through it in a speedy and healthy way is really the brunt of this conversation. Is this speaking to you? Does anybody get angry? So Hawkins, in his section on anger, he deals first with the irritability and the volatility and all of that energy that can be used to transform. And then he says here how one of these remedies of healing relationships that have these deep-rooted patterns of anger dynamics going on in them, one great tool to put into your toolbox is the tool of acknowledgement. So oftentimes people are pushing your buttons and they're causing you grief and nagging you, because there are all of these unconscious places where they've done kind things for you, and never been acknowledged by you. And so the tool of acknowledgement is something that he speaks about here, and it's a very valuable experience to pick a certain person in your life who, in your view, is critical towards you, and now within ourselves, begin to look at how we have failed to acknowledge this person. We surrender all of our negative feelings about them, and we begin to give them credit, affirming their value to us. Now, many years ago, I had to do this. I felt it brewing in me. My first marriage, a while back, it was about 17 or 18 years ago, you know those decisions where you go, what was I thinking? And so things did not go well with this person, and it ended in a infidelity, and I'm not wrong. Like, I just love how the ego is just always trying to save face. So it comes to the point where years and years later, I call my ex-wife, and I did this acknowledging. No matter what was done seemingly to me, I realized that in order for me to move on, in order for me not to have this bitterness in my spirit, I needed to be completely transparent with her, acknowledge who I was in the relationship that really caused a lot of the breakdown, and then totally let her know that whatever you have done in the relationship, it's a clean slate with me. We're done. We're clear. We're good. And after hanging up the phone, it was just like such a weight was taken off of me, because I could have walked around for decades with such bitterness and hatred towards her because of all of the crap that went down. And yet I knew in myself that I can actually see it another way. And I allowed, in the words of A Course in Miracles, to let miracles, these acts of love, acknowledgement in this case, to replace the grievances that I was holding with my ex-wife. And it was quite liberating. And that chapter was then closed. And he says, for instance, the person's value, we surrender all of our negative feelings about them. We begin to give them credit, of affirming their value to us. Their value may simply be that they are a spur to our emotional growth and development. The nagging spouse or scowling neighbor is trying to say something. Almost always in this sort of situation, such persons are not feeling acknowledged for the contribution they are making to our life. Once their value to us has been acknowledged, the nagging stops. You know, it's many, many years ago, one of my earliest books that I read when I was getting on the path and awakening to this higher way of seeing and being was Celestine Prophecy. And I think it's the first insight, if I'm not mistaken, where people sort of light up in your world and they have a message for you. And when you are dealing with people that carry these karmic messages for you, it could be something very beautiful and spontaneous, like walking into the church this morning and you've never met someone and you're going to see them on the way out, and somehow you get to connect and you're, wow, I didn't know that about you. And something beautiful transpires and it's exactly what you needed on your journey. And that can be one of the ways that this first insight can show up in your life. But to bring it back to this material, that scowling neighbor or that nagging spouse is also part of that first insight, where they keep lighting up on your dashboard because they have a message for you. As my wife had such a strong message for me last night. And if I have ears to hear, and I'm not trying to defend my ego, which we're going to talk about in a second, then I am more apt to tuning in and acknowledging what it is that is really being discussed. Because keep in mind, we have different layers of this unconscious mind. And the superficial layers resist the miracle. They resist the healing. And that's where the defense of the ego seems to be right at our fingertips, right at that first layer of the unconscious. So sometimes we really need to dig in and pull for those pure living waters that are below the ground of our mind so that they can come up and wash the present moment free of those ego defenses and really get into communication with somebody without trying to defend our mask. So without rambling further, I just want to close out with Hawkins saying that another pitfall to look for when you're being triggered, and this is kind of how it showed up for me last night. So we have a tool in our toolbox, acknowledgement, but here's a warning sign as a potential trigger, a very common trigger for anger, and that is expectation. So expectation of others is a form of emotional blackmail. Did that really sink in? Expectation of others is a form of emotional blackmail. And even if they're your daughter, right? My daughter should do this for me. I'm her mother, right? Or, my husband should do this if he was a good husband. And this expectation is literally blackmailing that person to do it your way. And the way that you bargain in that blackmail, it's not even a bargain, the way that you manipulate in that blackmail is through guilt. Right? Never been there before. We can feel our resistance when others pull for certain emotional goods from us. We can get away from being emotionally blackmailed by looking at how we do it with others. There's a beautiful lesson in A Course in Miracles where he has us examine these people that are really triggers for us and look at all of the things that they do that really irk us. And then he says in that exercise, that visualization, now ask yourself, would I condemn myself for doing this? Because what's going on again is there is a shadow realm in the unconscious that we don't own, and that somehow magically appears out there without us being associated with it. And these people who emotionally blackmail us, we get outraged and angry over. And yet we're blacking out, unconscious of the fact that we're doing it over here with this person. But we don't remember that when we're being blackmailed here. So he's, again, bringing this full spectrum panorama back into our awareness so that we can realize that we're always only doing this to ourselves. There's really nobody out there doing it to us. That's what we will ultimately experience. Then finally, he says, we can get away by looking at how we did it with others, and then we can let go of wanting to manipulate their emotional responses toward us. And so finally, he says, another way of preventing anger is by making a decision within yourself to no longer accept invalidation from others or the small aspect of yourself. Don't we get angry when people try to put us in a box or try to weaken us or take away our power? And again, it's like this, how dare you? It gets so visceral, right? But we're doing that to ourselves. Ultimately, deep down in the unconscious. And so he's saying, don't accept that aspect of yourself anymore. This decision can be in the form of a firm declaration. I will no longer accept invalidation from myself or others. Because we first have to invalidate ourselves for another to smell that, oh, I can invalidate that person, because this is all going on very subtly, invisibly, below the threshold of our conscious mind. And then we get into these dances and tangles with people, and how dare they invalidate me? And yet, I'm in such a habit of invalidating myself that really what's going on is they're just reinforcing what I value, what I want. So this is an important part to see that with this declaration, I will no longer accept it. I will no longer accept invalidation from myself or others. And then finally, when this is coupled with the habit of acknowledging all that is positive within ourselves and others, relationships rapidly change. Because you go into these high frequency states. Right? So we move from anger, which remember is at 150, and we go up the scale. Sorry, guys. Here it is. When we go up the scale from 150, we get out of anger, we move into pride, because you're no longer going to accept that invalidation. So there's a sense of personal pride. And that's at 175. And then you move into courage, to actually step out of your limiting beliefs, your disturbing emotions, and to really be your authentic self. That takes a lot of courage because of the inertia of your past, and your past relationships keep pulling on you. So you have to be a hero to really break out of that. And when you step across the threshold of courage, you're now in a completely different realm, he says. He says that this showed up on the world stage in 1987 with the convergence. In other words, when this higher consciousness really began to take root in the collective human species, there was that crossing of the threshold into the 200 range of courage. And individually, we have to do this as well, where now you're no longer going to show up as your ego, as your past, and you're going to recreate yourself in the present moment, and that takes a lot of courage, right? And that's how we move up. And then we go from courage to neutrality, to willingness, to acceptance, to reason, to love, and on up into enlightenment. So we are on an escalator in this conversation, by the way, because what we're doing here in this laboratory this morning, this temple of initiation, is really setting the patterns and rhythms of how this can play out in all of the other aspects of your life and all those other cycles and dynamics of your life, right? All right. Now we go to the root. So this is fun. So remember, within this conversation also, I have there's a context in which I'm speaking from, and that's what we experienced earlier this morning, moving through those layers of inauthenticity and coming back to your heart essence. And that heart essence, as you recall from your experience, is timeless. It is pure witness, pure awareness. And that is your divine bestowal. That is actually divine grace. It's your grace body of light, your divine awareness. And so we are always that. We are anchored in that. We are rooted in that. Every moment revolves around that. It's the axis mundi of all creation, your awareness, your true primordial awareness. But when we get lost in the fringes, when we get focused on these lower frequencies like desire and fear and anger, we actually lose our own center. We lose awareness of ourself. And then we're caught in the dark forest of these lower patterns. And this is where the ego has an opportunity to live. It lives in the dark forest. Do you see? It cannot live at the epicenter of your consciousness because it discorporates, it dissolves, because pure awareness, remember, it's like laughable. Why would I want to go into low frequency? Why would I want to wear a mask when I am this radiant grace? So the only way that the mask can survive is if it's on the periphery, outside of who you really are. And then you identify with these external thoughts and feelings and images, you see? And so one way that this anger will show up is in relationships that seem to be demanding things from you. Again, do you sense the autobiographical nature of this conversation? And he starts out this section, which is entitled Answering Outrageous Requests, by saying that you're either rich or poor in spirit. And to be considered spiritually impoverished means that we have invested wrongly and we have identified with a self-concept that is outside of our own radiance. And that's spiritual poverty. And he says then, suppose a brother insists that you do something you think you do not want to do. The very fact that this person is insisting that you do something that you don't want to do is that that person really believes that salvation, freedom, joy is wrapped up in you doing this for them, right? They're heavily invested in this request. And if you don't do it for them, there's like that, again, emotional blackmail, that guilt, that control, that pull. And then, and this is Jesus' saying, and he starts this whole passage out by saying, remember when I said to you that if a brother asks you to go 1 mile, go 2 miles with him instead? Well, this is what he's getting at here. This is the principle he's fleshing out. So this person's making an outrageous request, and if you insist on refusing and experience a quick response of opposition, you are believing that your salvation lies in not doing what this person is requesting of you. And that's the standoff. Now, there is one caveat, there is one warning here. If this person is like, let's go, shoot some heroin and rob some convenience stores. Well, that's an outrageous request, but A Course in Miracles is telling me that I shouldn't resist this outrageous request. Okay. No, there are some things that are going to be detrimental to your happiness and health and also for the other person. So those requests are off the table. But when it comes to requests where no one is going to be harmed, he goes on. Insistence means investment. And what you invest in is always related to your notion of salvation. Really important point here. The question is twofold. First, what is to be saved? And second, how can it be saved? So insistence means investment, and you're always invested in what you want to be saved. Okay? Now, what's to be saved and how are you going to save it is really what's operating in this situation of outrageous requests and why we get angry. Okay, so listen to what he says next. Whenever you become angry with a brother, for whatever reason, you are believing that the ego is to be saved. Got really quiet in here. Whenever you become angry with a brother, for whatever reason, you are believing that the ego is to be saved and to be saved by attack. If he attacks, you are agreeing with this belief, and if you attack, you are reinforcing it. Remember that those who attack are poor, because you're on that fringe of yourself. You're in the far country, like the prodigal son, you wandered away from your own abundant nature, right? So if we're attacking or we feel like we're being attacked, we're identifying with that false self in the periphery, that mask, yes? And you who could help them are surely acting destructively if you accept their poverty as yours. If you had not invested as they had, it would never occur to you to overlook their need. Now, I read this passage right after I shut the office door last night and locked it. And I read it, and I'm like, this can't be true. Not in this situation. And isn't that what we do? It's like we have it so clear in our mind. We've rationalized, justified why we are being angry. And what I'm doing in those moments, like I did last night, was I'm protecting this impoverished version of myself and trying to make my partner, my brother, my sister, the one who needs to bear the guilt as to why I'm upset. Right? So then, there's some, again, clarity coming in here where it says, at the basis of these special relationships that we find emotional blackmail and guilt and this dance of opposition and really standoff kinds of behavior. At the basis of these relationships, which are 100% ego relationships, it is impossible for the ego to enter into any relationship without anger. It's quite a blanket statement there. For the ego believes that anger makes friends. And it's not like that on the surface. And that's what he'll say. He'll say, this is not its statement. It's not going to tell you that. I really am angry with you. Would you like to be my friend? It's not its statement, but it is its purpose. Because it's trying to preserve itself apart from your radiance. So it's literally an attack on your radiance. And every relationship that is formed with that self-image where you're not pure grace light, if you're not pure grace light in a relationship, that relationship, the way you're perceiving it, is based on anger and emotional blackmail and manipulation. Is this making sense? For the ego really believes that it can get and keep by making guilty. So a lot of our relationships are glued together by guilt. People are doing things for us because they feel obligated. If we don't like what they're doing, we kind of give them that look, or we mention what we've done for them. And then right there is the guilt factor, and they feel obligated. And we do that, and we get that done to us because we're doing it. So this is its one attraction, an attraction so weak that it would have no hold at all except that no one recognizes it. Right? For the ego always seems to attract through love and has no attraction at all to anyone who perceives that it attracts through guilt. So keep in mind now, your mind might be processing like, well, that person that I'm in a relationship with now, it's all based on guilt. Like, what do I do? Well, it's actually, again, this turning about within your own self and realize that you're the one that can change it. You're the only one that can change it. So the relationship isn't bad or wrong. So please don't get that impression as we're going through this. And I know the time is ticking, and I want to get into the practice. But that's really important to get, that the relationships that are based within guilt and manipulation are not garbage. They're not to be run away from or trashed. They're to be transformed. And this is through the renewing of the mind, right? Okay, so the ego is counseling us in the relationship. And if we believe we're the ego, it will enable us to direct the anger that the ego holds outward. That's what we're just speaking about. So the ego's counsel is, this anger you're feeling doesn't belong to you. It is caused by that person. They're doing it to you. That's the ego's counsel. Right? And so it's a way of the ego protecting you. Right? You're saving the ego by projecting and thinking the anger is being done to you, and you're justified in being angry. And then it thus embarks on an endless, unrewarding chain of special relationships forged out of anger and dedicated to but one insane belief. What is the one insane belief that every ego relationship is dedicated to? It's this: that the more anger you invest outside yourself, the safer you become. The more anger you invest outside of yourself, they're wrong. They're doing this to me. I have every right to be upset with them. How dare they? That's the ego's game of saying, you're right. Anger is out there, and that makes us safe. So you're saving the ego, and how are you saving the ego? By making others wrong. And that game he calls an unrewarding chain. It binds the mind, it enslaves you to these low-frequency emotions, and it blocks you from entering back into the radiance of your own nature. So the payoff is worthless. And so we're at a place now in the conversation to turn it all around. And this is lesson 348. I have no cause for anger or for fear because you, God, surround me. And in every need that I perceive, your grace suffices me, satisfies me. So this is the declaration, because what I didn't read to you, because we're pressed on time, is that the reason why this whole anger game works is because we all believe we're like in these hermetically sealed minds all alone, and nobody's in there with us, and everybody else is out there. And we're cut off from life and every living thing. And this lesson is an opening up, allowing to receive this divine grace to come back in and to take us back home to ourselves. And he says in the form of a prayer, Father, let me remember you are here, and I am not alone. Surrounding me is everlasting love. I have no cause for anything except the perfect peace and joy I share with you. What need have I for anger or for fear? Surrounding me is perfect safety. Can I be afraid when your eternal promise goes with me? Surrounding me is perfect sinlessness. No one is guilty. What can I fear when you created me in this holiness, as perfect as your own? So allow those words to take root, those feelings and energies to permeate your body, mind, and the blue bag will go around. $348. So grateful for the offerings, knowing that they are seeds of light. We bless them with the intention to elevate all beings into their true nature. May they be happy and free. And so it is. Amen. Taking your seat, preparing to go into the silence. As your eyes close and your hands rest in the perfect mudra, return to awareness of the breath. And as you feel into the pulse of your breath, realize that this pulse, this spanda, connects you to the pulse of the greater universe. It is the greater universe pulsing through your microorganism. That is why the breath is the pneuma, it is the ruach, it is the spiritus, the gateway into higher consciousness. And in Sanskrit, they have a way of understanding this where with each inhale it has a sibilant or S sound. And they connect the Sanskrit word so. So as you're breathing in, it's so. And with the exhale, it's an aspirate or H sound, the Sanskrit hum. So with each inhale, it's so. And each exhale is hum, which means I am the immortal soul. I am the mind behind all minds. I am the life behind all life. I am the breath behind all breath. And I am the eye behind all eyes. The ear behind all ears. So hum. you're simply melting in to the quiet radiance at the center of your being. All of the energies, all of the images of illusion and separation, like cobwebs, with no strength to hold you back from melting into your core. Come home. As you bring your hands to heart, Namaskar Mudra, know that when you abide in and as this radiance, that you are the isness, the beingness of creation. And this isness, this beingness, is the holiest name of God in the Kabbalah, in the mystical tradition. And it is Yahweh. Yahweh Shema, the beingness, the Lord of beingness, is here. Yahweh Shema. Yahweh Shema. Yahweh Shema. Yahweh Shema. Yahweh Shema. Yahweh Shema. And so from this place of true joining, where we are all the isness of the present moment, we are the one being, we intone the sacred monosyllable mantra Om as a way of sharing in the resonance of this oneness, this isness, this Om. And so we take a collective exhale, we take a collective inhale. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste, my friends. When you're ready to stand, just holding your neighbor's hands. Knowing that your arms and your hands are extensions of your heart chakra. And so we are all joined at the heart, connected as one divine constellation in the glorious stillness of our grace light, listening to the closing words of Elizabeth. God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Amen. Glorious day, everyone. Thank you for being here.